Hey, Strategy Simplified, it's Japheth here, and I'm quickly popping in to tell you about Strategy Sprint. Strategy Sprint is a week-long virtual consulting project that allows you to add US-based work experience to your resume. So you work in a small team, you get mentored by a former McKinsey, Bain, or BCG consultant, and you solve a strategic growth issue for a real-world client. So that means you gain incredible skills and experience that looks amazing on your resume. We are running several sprint projects throughout this year. Check out the dates and the link to register at the link in this episode's show notes. We look forward to welcoming you to a future Strategy Sprint project.
Welcome to Strategy Simplified podcast. My name is Elizabeth Keshishan, and I am a second-year MBA student at Simon Business School, University of Rochester. I am the host of today's episode, and I will be interviewing Jenny Rae to learn about self-leadership and our lives.
I'm Jenny Rae, the Managing Director of Management Consulted, and a few weeks ago, somebody reached out to me and said, hey, I've got a class project and I need to interview somebody and I want to interview you. And I thought, what a great opportunity for a podcast mic takeover. So Elizabeth today is here to take over the hosting job on the podcast and to share a little bit with you about some of the questions that she has for me and how I might respond. And hopefully it'll be a little bit fun, a little spicy, and also a little serious. We're excited to dive into the conversation. Welcome, Elizabeth, to Strategy Simplified.
Good afternoon, and thank you so much for having me, Jenny. I'm very, very excited about this opportunity, and I was so happy that you said yes. I was telling to myself, she's so busy. Will we be able to do this now? Like, yes, we managed it. So very, very excited that we can do this now.
You know what? One of the rules of my life has been, there's a saying, if you want something done, give it to a busy woman. And I really believe in that. And so, I've always been the kind of person where people say, I hate to ask you to dinner because I know you're busy. I'm like, how's Tuesday? Like, you can always make time for things that are valuable and important. So I'm really glad that you asked. And my answer can't always be yes, but when it is, I get really excited about it.
I love that. And I'm feeling honored right now. To tell you a bit about myself, so currently I am a second-year MBA student at Simon Business School, University of Rochester. Anytime I say Rochester, people are like, where is that? There are several Rochester. It is in upstate New York. That is where I'm located. It's cold in here, yes. And speaking about something professional from my background, so I kickstarted my career as a professional Armenian folklore dancer. And after that, I earned 3 degrees in business. So people used to ask like, why? How come? And I'm like, oh, we're in business, we're good. And that is one of the amazing parts of my life in the past.
Amazing. Now, Elizabeth, we can talk about this a little bit later, but fun fact about me, I've been to Armenia. It's one of my favorite countries I've ever visited. Hey. And when it's always one of my like 2 truths and a lie, right? You know, if I say I've been to Armenia, or what's one place that you think that no one else in this group has ever gone to, Armenia is my answer. I had a wonderful experience there. And so I don't know if you actually grew up there and spent time there, if you're Armenian by descent, but it was just a wonderful experience. So just wanted to make sure I shared that.
It is fascinating to hear that. I came to the US for school. So before that, I was living in Armenia my whole life. And I cannot help but ask, what was the most favorite thing about my country for you?
So I one of the things that is always fun about being in a country for me that's really different than what you can see in a picture is what the experience is, how you feel. And I felt incredibly safe in Armenia. It was one of the safest places I felt on the earth. I feel safer in Armenia than I do in California right now. And so there's, it's one of those things, you can't take a picture of that. You can't take a picture of safety, but what that created was a sense of community, a sense of like vibrancy, some of the outdoor, food options that you could eat, walking in the evenings, going to the steps in Yerevan at dawn or at different times. Again, things that I actually wouldn't even feel safe in my home state, in my home country doing, I felt incredibly remarkably safe doing in Armenia. And that was just to me a testament of the honesty, the integrity, the hardworking nature of the people. There were many other things. I mean, I saw a lot of very beautiful places around the countryside in Armenia. I had a lot of adventures, but that was the one thing that really did stand out to me.
Thank you so much for sharing it. All of it made me really miss home. Especially given the current situation, I hope everyone stays safe in my country.
Me too.
Well, thank you so much for sharing all of it. And because, as you mentioned, I had this class about leadership, I really have some burning questions for you that I would like to pick your brain on. Are you ready, Jenny?
I was born ready, Elizabeth. I was born ready. My mom says, from the minute that I was born, she's been holding on to my tails. So,
Okay. Awesome. Alrighty. So knowing about you, about the platform management consulted and interacting with it a lot, I came to dig deeper about your background and who you are, what are all the leadership roles that you had, and to describe you in a single sentence, you are the CEO at Management Consulted, you are the creator of MoneyCamp, you're a coach, and you're a very active citizen. So all of this speak about the leadership qualities that you have. My question is, when did you realize the first time that you are a leader?
I love that. I'll point back that I just sometimes will respond to the first thing that comes to mind because maybe there's a deeper truth that I haven't fully explored. But I was in middle school, and I had done things in elementary school that were leadership oriented, but they were really self-guided. I was a spark for something. For example, I in fourth or fifth grade, I recognized that our school didn't have a recycling program, and I went to multiple classes, and I had different students make posters about saving the earth, and then I encouraged our school to start a recycling program, and I was able to get that done. But it wasn't something where I led other people directly. It was I led an initiative, I led an idea. And so if you ask me about entrepreneurship or initiative, that's probably my answer. But leadership to me involves other people following you. There has to be somebody following you in order for it to be considered leadership. And so when I was in middle school, my a couple friends and I were at a cookout in the early summer with our families in the backyard of a neighbor, and some of the parents were talking about this problem that they had. It was a real first world problem, let me tell you, but it was that when they went to golf, they weren't able to have a cold drink in the middle of the golf game because any of the bottles or cans that they carried with them got warm on a hot day. Carrying a cooler with ice inside it. This was right before insulated mugs or anything like this. Carrying a cooler with ice would be too heavy, and so they were talking about this problem, and I immediately saw a business opportunity. I was like, what if we just sold sodas on the 7th or 8th tee of the golf course, which happened to be really close to where this friend lived. And so I convinced 2 of my fellow middle schoolers to come with me. And so we went to swim team practice in the morning, and then we got a cooler, put some sodas in it, and went to the golf course. And we made a sign, which was a list of all the things that we sold and the prices that we sold them for. And we that first day we almost sold out. And we thought, wow, this is something amazing. But doing it once wouldn't have been leadership. I think what ended up really being powerful is that we created a structure and a schedule. And there were, multiple people that were there. We started to, this is really early data analytics, right? But we started to figure out what sold the most and where we could buy it. And so we would do research in the newspaper on different ads of the local grocery stores and who was selling sodas or bottled water for cheap. And then we would go and we would source things, and everybody really played an active part in this. But it was something that I really attribute a great learning experience to, because we were able to make and save a lot of money. Actually, that summer, more than $1,000 each, which was a lot of money in middle school in the 1980s. But it was also a really powerful learning experience about how having an idea is one thing, but then sustaining the idea and creating, opportunity takes the building of a team, and that requires leadership.
I love that. Thank you for sharing. And as you shared that, I remembered my school stories. So there was this time when the school incorporated a change, and it absolutely sounded like a nonsense to me. And I collected this group of people, shared my ideology with them, and said, you know what, right now we're making posters, we're going and standing in front of the school, we're doing a protest, and we're calling national TV. National TV came and recorded our speech and everything, and after that the school made some adjustments. But that was such a fun experience. And as I was hearing your experiences about it starting from school and also how you noticed opportunities, it really, really is motivating and exciting to hear how we can see leadership within ourselves in so early ages of our lives. And that is just fascinating.
Love it.
And Jenny, as you saw this, okay, I feel like I have leadership potential. What did you do to cultivate that leadership inside of you?
Well, let me say something that might sound really funny. I don't know that I knew how to cultivate it myself, but I feel like I should really attribute this to great parenting and encouragement of my family. My family saw in me leadership potential. They actually saw it in all the kids. I think they if they didn't see it, they went and found it, right? They went hunting for it. But what they encouraged in me was the courage to stand alone. And so I don't know that it started with me feeling like I could be different or wanted to think differently than other people. I don't know that kids actually naturally want to do that. I think it's more natural to want to fit in, to want to belong, to want to, be a part of everything. But I would say that cultivating leadership, not yet self-leadership in me, from middle school through high school, kind of the development that my parents encouraged for me to do was to be myself, to stand alone, and to, if the crowd was going this way, to be willing to go this way. And if the crowd was doing this thing, to stand alone, to do a different thing. If everybody was saying one thing, to say something different. And one just like moment of that, I just remember my mom saying, like, if you ever go to a party and you feel alone, don't try to fit in, try to find one other person who feels alone too. And it was kind of that sense of like, there's a different way rather than the mainstream. And that's really kind of what fundamentally leadership has to be, right? Leadership does not belong to popularity contests and polls. Leadership is actually swaying opinions or moving in a different direction. And so I think the foundation of that was that courage to not do what everyone else was doing. And so sometimes when I teach, I say, like, my parents gave me the greatest gift of all, which was that I was uncool when I was young, and not trying to fit in and not trying to be like everybody has given me the independent thought and the courage to stand out from a pretty young age.
I love that so much. And now that you say it, it reminds me of this book that I read. It's called Self-Leadership. It is by Andrew Bryant and Anna Kazan, if I said that correctly.
Cool.
So they're speaking about
We should put a link to it in the show notes so that people can read it if they think it's valuable. Yeah.
On it. So what this book is speaking about is the importance of self-leadership, which really means taking control of our lives by staying true to what we are and what we believe in. And the book speaks about self-esteem and it not being defined by what we do, but who we are, by our roots, by our beliefs, by the way we feel. And at the end of the day, what it really says is that no matter if the person wants to be a leader or a follower, everyone has this role to be a self-leader. because it is about our personal lives.
Mm-hmm.
I really love that. And I feel like the more I hear you speak about your experience, about your leadership journey, especially in the early stages, the more I can say that you identify with this concept and these beliefs. What else would you like to add? Does it resonate with you?
It does. I think, what's really interesting has actually been a secondary adjustment that I've had to make later in my career that I feel like I want to share a little bit about now. Because I think that there is a part of me that actually felt like my self-esteem wasn't tied up in my looks. It was not tied up in my performance. I've never bragged about a bank account. And there's always been this humility, I think partially from my travels. I've traveled really extensively. I've been to over 55 countries. And in those travels, you just realize like there's always somebody wealthier and more powerful and more advanced than you in your career. And there's always somebody who's less fortunate, right? Like in every situation, it doesn't matter whether you're in your own backyard or in a totally different country. And so I felt that again, that like independence and self-ownership. But one thing that was really interesting is that what I didn't do well until pretty recently in my career was model the value that I had for myself in the way that I dressed. Isn't this funny? So as a woman, I found that a lot of women try to compensate for a lack of self-esteem by dressing really beautifully or by spending a lot of time on hair and makeup, right? And it was like a compensation issue. And so I always kind of steered away from that. But what I wasn't doing was expressing that I value who I am and that I value what people experience of me in anything other than in the kind of like the ethereal, right? And so what happened is that when I transitioned into public leadership, which really started in my role as CEO of Management Consultant, but then continued when I ran for office in California, taking a stand in the public eye, they needed to understand who I was based on how I looked in a different way. And so I had a stylist who actually authentically challenged me and said, like, I think that you rely on people getting to know you too deeply for them to recognize who you are and what you carry. And I actually think it's okay for you to dress with the authority that you carry. And so I just have to say, I think there's actually like two ends of the spectrum. There's having too little self-esteem and self-leadership and self-ownership. Like it's blaming other people and being a victim, et cetera. But I think there's also like having a little bit too much where you're so much of a renegade that becomes your identity and you hurt people's ability to see the leadership and the capability that you carry because you don't reflect who you really are in other ways, like how you dress, how you speak, how you carry yourself, who you open yourself up to. And so over my career, I think I've become more generous with my time, more willing to help, more focused on how I feel and look in my physical presence and experience. And I've really like grown into that in a different way than other people's experience might have been.
I love it. And I can echo it in so many different ways, especially coming from the eastern part of the whole world. If, let's say, women would wear nicely, then there would be a stigma thinking, you might not be that smart. And for me also personally, it took me so much time and energy to say, okay, the way I look maybe corresponds to what I have inside. How about we have a conversation? And then people after having some conversations would say, oh, you're also smart. I'm like, is that a compliment or should I be offended by it? I
it's
love
a unique
this.
challenge that we have as women, I think. But I think my parents did such a good job of not defining our self-esteem with my external appearance, and there was like a reckoning that came later in my career where I had to actually recognize that people's experience of me was a reflection of who I was. So part of leadership and part of self-esteem was corresponding their whole experience of me with who I actually was. And it's taken a lot of work to try to figure out what that looks like.
It is so much appreciated. I love that story. in that fact about you. And as we speak about self-esteem, so again, going back to the book Self-Leadership, it was saying that as a result of self-leadership, you develop the quality of self-confidence. So the interesting thing about that is that the book wasn't really defining self-confidence. So I went ahead and started digging and talking to different people, and I don't think I still have my final definition. So I'm gonna refer this question to you. What is self-confidence to you?
I love it. I'm a storyteller, so I'll tell another story. One of my early mentors, his name was Hans, a Swiss gentleman. I was working on a project with some international organizations in South Africa, and I was really underqualified, right? I'd never done it before. And I at that point in my career, I was pretty young. I felt like one of the responsibilities of doing something was that you had to have done it before, which I think is an incredibly reasonable thesis, right? That you would gain confidence through success. And he redirected me to take on challenges and opportunities without previous success. And the reason that he said that was, he said, actually, the definition of, confidence or ability is not whether or not you have done something before, but whether you are able to do it. And so for me, that created a mindset shift that really altered the way I thought about a lot of different things in my career. When I joined my first founding team, I had never been on a founding team before. And I think you can draw parallels of, like, I had skills from my time at Bain to join a founding team. I had skills from my founding team to purchase a business. But in reality, it actually wasn't linear like that. It wasn't a stair-step approach, and I didn't walk my career in a way where building skills was what built the confidence in me. It was an assessment from that point forward of any situation based on my ability to engage and solve the problems that would come up, not with my history. Right? So I think self-confidence is based on an understanding of your ability, which you get by testing it, not by the skills and experiences that you necessarily have. There is some overlap, but they're not the same thing. Your ability can be defined before you ever do something. And your ability to stick to something can be defined before you ever enter into a situation that will require grit and determination. Your ability to work with people, not against them, can be defined way before you are working in a certain environment where that kind of thing will be required. And your understanding of I will do whatever it takes is built, I think, through a little bit of experience, but more through your mindset and through the definition of who you are. You decide how hard you're going to work, how sticky you are, right? How far you push in. You decide if you're able. You can't let anybody else define it for you, and you can't define it only based on your experiences either.
Okay. My key takeaway: ability over background or experience.
Correct.
And as you shared this story, this really takes me to professional leadership. So leadership in a business context and team context. The more we look at the history, great leaders are great decision makers. And do you see any tie between self-confidence leading to good decision making, or is there something else that helps you to be a good decision maker?
Yeah. Decisions deliver data. And if you value an ongoing leadership process, you recognize that making decisions provides data, and that data is not the pathway to the decision. It's the other way around. And let me explain what I mean by that. I often will kind of ask people when I'm coaching them or consulting with them, with their companies largely, I'll say, are you an Amazon or an Apple culture? And they don't usually know what that means up front. But I say, do you require perfection, and do you make the decisions in advance, which is an Apple culture, right? You create one product a year and you think about every element of it. And then you tell the customer, this is the thing that you want. You want an iPhone, you want an iPad, you want AirPods, you need Apple Music, right? Like whatever it is that is the kind of thing, they work incessantly on singular focus and design. Honestly, the majority of people, if they are like that, are simply paralyzed by a lack of decisions and not really focused. Okay, because what Apple does is they take decisions and they make a significant number of micro decisions that begin with one big decision. What is the one thing we're going to do this year? Right. And then they move into that decision with a significant number of other decisions. For more people, they think of themselves as an Amazon culture. And Amazon is an experimental culture. Amazon will spin up a new business or buy a business or try something new. And they are ruthless about rapid experimentation, right? And what I think they recognize, which is true in both situations, but portrays itself differently, is that decisions deliver data, right? You make a decision, you execute on something, and you receive the data from it that you could not receive through the analytical process of what the data might be. And so Apple does that to create a single product. Amazon does it in a portfolio setting. But really for both of them, those decisions are what are delivering data. So that as a decision maker has helped me, especially as I have kind of, risen up the ranks, have larger teams, think about other things. I think of decisions not as end all be all. I don't overanalyze them. I think of them as opportunities to achieve data on something that we don't have yet. And when you think of decisions as opportunities and data points along the pathway of a broader movement of an organization, they are incredibly, incredibly valuable. So you make more of them.
We'll be right back after this quick break.
Have you ever heard a new digital trend and thought to yourself, okay, does this really matter? Asking the right questions helps you cut through the noise and get down to what matters most. I'm Jim Hertzfeld, host of the What If, So What podcast, where we discover what's possible with digital and figure out how to make it real by asking what if, so what, and most importantly, now what? Subscribe and listen, and together we can turn big ideas into tangible actions so you can get shit done.
I love this, and I love the question that you posed. Are you an Amazon culture or an Apple culture? And I actually took the question and I said, oh, I want to be Amazon culture, but I feel like I'm Apple culture. And looking back, one piece of feedback that I've been receiving continuously is that I'm a hopeless perfectionist. And in my recent years, I'm like, I'm a recovering perfectionist. And then I realized, no, I'm still a perfectionist. What piece of advice would you give me to step by step walk away from being a perfectionist?
Yeah. Well, I think perfectionists have to trick themselves speaking as a recovering perfectionist. We have to trick ourselves into moving. Right, into movement. And we have to define success or perfection as a volume of movement, not as an end goal. And so if you think of your end goal as like, I work out 7 days a week, or I like get an A, and if I miss something, I'm just, ruthless about it, then it can really hinder your future decision making. If you think about it and you say, awesome, like I think that perfectionists can add a lot to company culture when they reflect on mistakes. Right. But if they reflect only on mistakes and it keeps you from future action, then you're going to really hinder the movement that is necessary to make decisions in cultures. And like Elizabeth, we offer services to companies. We do corporate trainings and we do corporate coaching for people who are doing presentations and analytics, right? Which is a lot of people inside a lot of different companies. But when we do that, they hire us because people are perfectionists, which means that they are terrified of making a decision because weight is held in decisions. But what ends up happening is that entire organizations get paralyzed when you put multiple people in a chain who don't want to make decisions together, and they want to analyze and analyze and analyze. So again, I think like if you redefine that goal where the decision is the pathway to the data of whether or not you are doing the right thing or not, it's not the fork in the road, right? It's just a pathway. It's like, it's a necessary piece of the path. I think it helps you put the decision into the perfectionist process and not outside of it.
Uh-huh. And would you also say that it is important to choose the right company that has the culture for you to have that freedom to make mistakes, go fast and learn fast?
I totally wouldn't. I actually, no. Like, I worked for a company that had a really bad culture.
Okay.
I think you decide this yourself. I think that it's great. I think you decide if you're going to be a top performer in whatever culture you're in. And the more top performer roles you have, the more opportunities you'll have. I don't think that you should stay in a culture for an incredibly long time. But it's the same thing. Like, you are going to deliver data and information by making a choice. I think Elizabeth, you could go to 100 different companies and you could have an experience that you will define more than the company will define for you. And if you do that, then every place you go, you will know that you are more your own master than they are of you. And when that happens, you find yourself in places aggregating in places where there are more people who think as self-masters than as people who are mastered by a culture. So I think that culture is shaped by you as much as it is participated in by you, right? So go wherever you're going to go and make a mark there, and then choose whether you want to stay. But I wouldn't worry as much about predefining exactly the culture that you want to go into.
That's how you know that you're a self-leader. Thank you for this. I love the piece of advice. Love this. And as I ask for a piece of advice, I'm pretty sure that whoever is listening or watching to the conversation, they would also want to ask some piece of advice. So reflecting back on what we talked about self-leadership, we talked about building confidence and about decision-making. What would you like to leave our listeners or audience with to be able to cultivate themselves and build self-leadership to take control over their lives?
I love it. Some of the most valuable money I've ever spent is taking people out to breakfast or lunch. And I really want to encourage y'all to reach out to people that inspire you, or people who you hear that inspire you, and to not consider a barrier in between you and them. I think like it's your job to break down that barrier. But I turn down very few offerings. If somebody says, can I take you out to breakfast or lunch? Sometimes like, you're gonna have to fly to my city. And every once in a while they do, but there are other people that are like there in the world that would all attribute our success to a library of input that we received from other people. I'm not saying that people become mentors. Like, the one guy that made the greatest impact on me in 2023, I had one breakfast with. One. That's it.
Okay.
So you don't need ongoing input. You need an injection from catalysts to really kind of build the life that you want. So that's my first recommendation, is like, spend a little bit of money taking people out to breakfast or lunch. I actually don't really like coffee personally, because I want to work during the time that everybody else is drinking coffee. So I'm a breakfast and lunch person. Not everybody's like that, but I'm kind of like, gotta eat 45 minutes. I'd love to do it anyhow. The second thing that I would suggest, like, you might not know about me, everybody who's listening, but like, I live in a town of 120,000 people. I do not live in a major city. I moved to this town and I felt like I had moved out of the mainstream. And when I went to business school after living in this town for 7 years, you want to know what the number one question that people asked me was? How did you figure out that that was one of the best real estate markets in the country where you could deliver outsized returns? And I was like, come on, guys, this is not analytics or mastery or anything. This is like growing where you're planted. This is going and figuring it out. And I just really want to encourage everybody who's listening that wherever you are, you can make a difference. Wherever you are, you can find people who are making an outsized impact in the community. Wherever you are, you can buy real estate and lead businesses and build relationships. that are successful and thriving. And so when people like, I literally could live anywhere in the world now. I have the money and the ability and the freedom to be able to do it. I could buy myself citizenship in most countries if I wanted to. I choose to live in my 120,000 person town because this is where I discovered that opportunities are everywhere. And I think if you think like that, you will find yourself successful wherever you go. So I just would encourage everyone to think of themselves as opportunity finders on a hunt to discover where those are. And sometimes you might be surprised, but the best ones are in the towns of the 120,000 people, not where everybody else is looking for them.
Thank you for the precious gems, Jenny. Thank you. That was very helpful, insightful, and motivating. And I believe it helped everyone in our audience to go ahead, take a moment, and reevaluate their self-leadership and what they want to do next to take control of their lives. Thank you so much for this amazing conversation. This concludes all of the questions, burning questions that I had for you. And it was such a pleasure to be chatting with you.
Wonderful. Thanks, Elizabeth. You're a great podcast Mic Takeover host, and we are really grateful that you took the time to come today. Thanks again for your time.
Thank you.
Strategy Simplified. I really hope you enjoyed this fantastic conversation between Elizabeth and Jenny Rae. If you'd like to pitch yourself for a podcast Mic Takeover, you can do that. We'd love to hear from you. Check out the link in the show notes for an email. That email is podcast@managementconsultant.com. Get in touch. Tell us what you want to talk about and why you'd be a good fit for the show, and we will take you into consideration. In addition, if you're enjoying the show, please leave a rating and review on Apple Podcasts or Spotify, wherever you're listening from. It really helps the show reach more listeners. All right, we'll catch you again on the flip side.